Hi guys, welcome back. Now, in the previous videos, we have covered basically with demand and we've also covered with supply. So basically, this part of the syllabus 2.3, we are done with 2.3. We've also done with 2.4, and now our next subtopic in under demand and supply is price determination. Now, coming back, guys, when we talk about price determination, we're actually going to be determining how prices are determined in a market. Technically, when you say that, the determination of a price, we actually mean market equilibrium or the determination of an equilibrium price. But what exactly is a market? If you guys remember that, what first you need to understand what is a market equilibrium. But before we understand what is a market equilibrium, let's revisit what a market is. So a market is any situation where buyers and sellers are coming together to exchange goods and services. Now, it doesn't really need to be a physical place. I mean, it could be a fruit market, supermarket, online shopping platforms, right? So, so basically, you need to have a buyer and a seller for something to be called a market. So, and what really matters is that we're talking about the interaction between buyers and sellers. So when we talk about market equilibrium, you need to understand that we're generally talking about the interaction between buyers and sellers being in equilibrium. Because when you talk about a market is when you have buyers and you have sellers, and then so you're talking about an equilibrium between buyers and sellers. And so from the buyer we get demand, because demand captures buyer's willingness to purchase, right, at particular prices, while supply captures seller's willingness to produce and sell, at particular price. So technically, from buyer we get the demand, from the seller we get the supply. So when we're talking about market equilibrium, we're talking about demand and supply being in equilibrium, that is, being in a state of stable equilibrium, right? That is, they both are equal. Now, that is demand equals supply. So when talking about demand and supply equilibrium or market equilibrium, we're talking about a situation where demand is exactly equal to supply. So because you need to understand that in every market, I mean, what's the psychology of buyers? Buyers want a lower price, while sellers in every market want higher prices. So the key question is that if buyers want a lower price and the sellers want a higher price, then there is, I mean, then what is the price that they both would settle on? So the key question is that at what price will both buyers and sellers be satisfied? And that price is called the equilibrium price, right? So remember, guys, that a market is an equilibrium when demand equals supply. And when the market is in equilibrium, there is no shortage, there is no surplus, and the market is in balance. So there's no shortage, no surplus, the market is in balance, and you can say that the market is calm and there is no pressure for prices to change. When you talk about an equilibrium, you're talking about that there's no pressure on prices to change, because at that price demand equals supply, so there's no reason for the price to change. And I explain that in a bit what I'm saying. So basically, let's look at a table here. Let's say that this is the price. You have three columns here: price, quantity demanded, quantity supplied. So you have, on the first column you have price, and quantity demanded and quantity supplied. And this price is basically the market price. That is, the market price is the price at which the product is bought and sold, right? So if the market price is $9, let's say, if the market price is $9, the quantity demanded is 11. It means that in the market, if $9 is the price, and 11 units will be bought and sold in the entire market. We're talking about the market demand curve. We're not talking about the individual demand curve. We're talking about the entire market demand curve, comprising of the demand of all the customers, or all the consumers, individual consumers, the horizontal sum. So at $9, the quantity demanded is 11 units, while the producers, I mean, if the market price is $9 and 11 units, consumers would be willing and able to buy 11 units. But sellers would be only able to produce and sell 8 units. So if demand is 11 while supply is 8 at a price of 9, then you have a shortage of 3 units, and this is also called excess demand, right? But if the price is, let's say, $10, and as the price is increasing, the quantity demanded will fall. Simple law of demand. Law of demand said when the price goes up, the quantity demanded goes down. There's a contraction in demand, right? But at a price of $10, the supply rises from 8 to 10, right? Because when the price goes up, the quantity supplied goes up. There's an extension in supply. So what you see over here is that at a price of $10, the quantity demanded is 10 and the quantity supplied is 10 as well. So both are equal and there is no surplus or shortage, which means that this is sort of representing a market equilibrium. But if you look at the price of 11, the price goes up further. If the price is $11 and a price of $11, quantity demanded goes down further from 10 to 9, While quantity supply rises further from 10 to 11, meaning that at a price of $11, 11 units are being, suppliers are willing to sell 11 units, while demand is only 9 units. And the reason why demand is falling as price is going up is simply to do with law of demand, while the reason why supply is going up as the price is going up has to do with law of supply, ceteris paribus. Even the extension in supply, the law of supply we talked about, that as price goes up, firms are incentivized to produce more because of higher profitability. Same reason. But you see at a price of $11 as well, if demand is 9 and supply is 11, then 2 units is still, surplus and excess demand. 2 units are representing excess supply, excess supply and surplus, right? Well, at the price of $9, you have a shortage of 3 units, you have excess demand here, right? It is only at $10 that supply equals demand, because at a price of $10, the quantity demanded is 10 while the quantity supplied is 10 as well. Technically, what you're trying to say over here is that I want you to understand this, that at a price of, this is a demand curve, at a price of $9 the quantity demanded is 11, at a price of $10 the quantity demanded is 10, and at a price of $11 the quantity demanded is, let's say, how much? 9, right? And but if, let's say, the supply curve upward sloping, at a price of $9 the supply is, let's say, 8, at a price of $10 the supply is 10, and at a price of $11 the supply is 11. Now if I sort of copy the supply, if I bring this entire supply curve, if I copy this entire supply curve and I somehow paste it on, let's color code this as in blue. If I copy this entire supply curve and I sort of paste it somewhere over here like this is a supply curve. So you'll automatically notice that at a price of $10, the point where demand is intersecting with supply or touching supply or intersecting supply is a point of equilibrium, because at that price, the amount that consumers are willing and able to buy, that is their demand, is exactly equal to the number of units producers are willing and able to produce at that price. So what we learn is that the point where demand and supply are equal, that is a point of equilibrium, right? There's no shortage, there's no excess, there's no surplus, there's no excess demand, there's no excess supply. Now another term for shortage is excess demand, another name for surplus is excess supply. Now if you were to represent this diagrammatically, guys, now remember that when you were individually drawing demand and supply curves, when this was demand curve that you were drawing, we used to measure this as quantity demanded, we used to measure this as price, and when we were drawing the individual supply curve, we used to measure this as quantity supplied, we used to measure this as price. But now you're studying market equilibrium, you're studying the interaction of demand and supply together in a market, so you need to draw the demand and supply curves together. And how do you do that? First you draw the quantity axis, and you draw 2 axes. Over here you will write quantity, and this quantity would be representing quantity demanded and quantity supplied, because on the quantity axis, which is your horizontal axis, you would be representing the quantity of demand and the quantity of supply. So just write quantity here, and this is price, right? And just write price here, and you draw the demand curve like this, downward sloping. You have to draw the supply curve like this, upward sloping. So you draw the demand and supply together, and the point where they both are intersecting is giving us the price at which they both would be equal. So at $10, the demand and supply is equivalent to 10 units, which means that at the market clearing price, now $10 is the market clearing price, because at a price of $10, the producers are willing and able to sell 10 units, to make and sell 10 units, while the buyers are willing to buy 10 units as well. So if producers are making 10 units and buyers are buying all of those 10 units, so there is no units that are being left over, because neither less is made, neither more is made, right? So demand exactly equals supply, and this is basically the equilibrium point that is represented by a sign of E representing equilibrium. And technically it is also representing that there's no pressure on prices to change. There's no reason for prices to go up and down, because later Abhi you learn in this video that there are reasons that could cause prices to adjust such that equilibriums are restored in the market, and I'll explain what I just said. So let's look at the diagram, guys. $10 is known as the market clearing price, right? It is a market clearing price, while 10 units is representing equilibrium quantity. This is the quantity at which quantity demanded equals quantity supplied, and hence there is no surplus, no shortage, and the market cleared itself. Market cleared itself meaning no surplus, no shortage, neither the excess demand, neither the excess supply. Demand exactly matches supply. Now guys, the next thing that we need to do is that we need to learn about how do we represent a shortage on a diagram. Now individually, previously we just saw this, that we drew a table and we saw how these shortages are rising. But let's say that if you want to graphically represent that, so let's say that if the market equilibrium price is $10, but so you draw a demand curve, you draw a supply curve, right? You draw a demand curve like this, you draw a supply curve like this, you have a price of 10, you have a quantity of 10, and then let's say at a price of $9, what happens? So at a price of $9 is demand and supply. So at a price of $9, the quantity demanded is 8, and these are the same units that I've extracted from the table above. At a price of $9, the quantity supplied is 8, while the quantity demanded is 11. So the quantity demanded is 11, right? Well, this is the quantity demanded, this is the quantity supplied, right? And remember that on the horizontal axis you were measuring quantity because it was representing the quantity of demand and supply both. And the reason why I was representing the quantity of demand and supply both is because you're drawing a demand and supply diagram both, right? And so you have price over here. So this is representing a shortage, or you can say excess demand. And the correct way to represent this is on the horizontal axis. Don't show it from here. Don't show it that don't mark it over here that this is the shortage. This is the quantity is representing the shortage. This area is representing a shortage, right? This is representing shortage, meaning that quantity demanded exceeds quantity supplied, or demand exceeds supply at a price of $9. So $9, guys, is not the market clearing price. $9 is not the equilibrium price. $9 is not at all the equilibrium price because the market is not cleared at that point, right? So you have a shortage, and a shortage is the amount by which demand is greater than supply, and you have excess demand. Similarly, guys, moving on, we can also represent a surplus on the diagram. So if let's say at a price let's say you have a demand and supply, and at a price of $10, the demand and supply are equal, so the market clearing price is 10. But let's say that if the price is $11, let's say you set the price $11, you should have set the price as $10, but let's say the firm set the price at $11. So at $11, the quantity supplied would be higher because of there's a positive relation between higher price and higher quantity supplied. As the price goes up, there's an extension in this supply, so the quantity supplied jumps up from 10 to 11, but the demand jumps down, it contracts from 10 to 9. So you have a surplus now. Surplus 11 minus 9 is a surplus. It is the amount by which supply is greater than demand. And this is obviously, so whenever the price would be higher than remember that whenever the price would be higher than the equilibrium price, there would be a surplus, while the price is lower than the equilibrium price, there would be a shortage. Right, guys? And remember, guys, that surplus and shortages, that is excess demand and excess supply, are basically representing inefficiency. They're representing a misallocation of resources, because either in surplus or excess supply, too much is being produced which is not sold, and in a shortage, too less is being produced which should have been sold, right? So it's representing misallocation, and it is representing inefficiency, right? And so what we learn is that disequilibrium is a situation when there is an imbalance between demand and supply. They both are not in balance, right? So that's it. Now, another thing that I want you to learn in this class is that what really happens. Now, you need to understand that, okay, fine, you guys just learned right now. So you guys just learned right now that, what, at a price of $9, when the price is below the equilibrium, then let's say if the price is set at $9, then there is excess demand. But then what happens when you have a shortage, or what happens when you have an excess demand? Like, what happens next? What is the next thing that would happen? Now, don't think, guys, that if the price is $9, don't think that this will always be like that. So let's say if today the price is $9, don't think that the market will always stay like that. No, the market will not stay like that. The market will keep adjusting, and it will adjust on its own. I want you to write this down. The market will adjust on its own such that it will automatically reach equilibrium at a price of $10. Maybe tomorrow or day after, or maybe a week or a month, we don't know the time, but the market will ultimately readjust or adjust back to a stable equilibrium. The market will adjust back to a stable equilibrium, and I'll tell you the reason why. You see, what will happen is that at a price of $9, you have 11 units that are being demanded, but the sellers are only producing and selling 8 units. But the sellers are not stupid. They're also noticing that, at a price of $9, there's more demand, but there's less supply. So definitely, they also know that we are selling less, and there's more demand. So definitely we could pump up the prices, and so what they'll do is that they know that there's excess demand, and then the markets will automatically push up price. There would be an upward pressure on prices. There would be an upward force on prices. That is, the price would go up automatically. It would start going up from 9 to 9.1, 9.2, maybe 9.5, all the way till 10. And remember that prices would keep on rising. Remember, guys, that prices would keep on rising, and as they are rising, what happens is that by the price of $9, the quantity supplied is 8, and by the price of $11, the price of $9, the quantity supplied is 8, but at the price of $9, the quantity demanded is 11. So when the prices starts going up, the quantity demanded starts to contract because of the law of demand. As the price goes up, the quantity demand goes down. Ceteris paribus, law of demand. While the quantity supplied would start extending, right? As the price goes up, quantity supplied goes up because of higher profitability. So as the price is going up, producers would start producing and selling more, and the quantity supplied would increase from 8 to 10, while the quantity demanded would decrease from 11 to 10, and the market equilibrium would be restored at equilibrium E. So what we're saying is that the fact that markets are in disequilibrium, or you have an excess demand or excess supply, guys, is temporary, and it is not an ultimate fixed position. Markets, remember, I want you to understand this, that even if you have a disequilibrium in a market that is temporary, markets will restore efficiency and they will restore equilibrium on their own. And how do they do that? Guys? They do that because prices adjust automatically. Write this down, students, as you have heard what I just said. Write this down as I speak, that prices adjust automatically. Markets adjust automatically. Prices adjust automatically. And when I say that prices adjust automatically in a market, what we're saying is that they start rising, that firms would start at selling at higher prices, and that would automatically kick out all those consumers who can't really afford at the higher price through a contraction in demand. At the same time, it would encourage firms to produce more, and there would be a contraction in demand and extension in supply, restoring market equilibrium, right? And exactly, I've written this as well, that market automatically eliminates the shortage or excess demand if the market price is initially set below the equilibrium. So there would be upward pressure on prices, and hence demand would contract while supply extends. And this adjustment process keeps on happening until demand is equal to supply again. Right, so at $9 you have an initial shortage, but that shortage will not persist. It's not consistent. It's not fixed. It's markets will restore back to equilibrium. So if you have a shortage, it means that prices are low. They're lower than what they should be. Because at price of $9, consumers want to buy more, while firms want to sell less at a price of $9. So a lot of the consumers, or some consumers, are left empty-handed because of shortage. And consumers technically are starting to compete with each other. Consumers starting to compete with each other mean that who gets the product first, because the product is short in the market. So market is observing that, firms are observing that. So prices would start rising in the market, and the market moves back to equilibrium. Okay, guys, now similarly, we're going to repeat the same process over here as well. That, for instance, if you have a market price that is above the equilibrium at $11, let's say instead of $10, you set the price at $11, and you realize that, you know what, you have a surplus. Oh my God. Now, the surplus is not consistent or persistent. But at the price of $11, the quantity supplied is 11, while the quantity demanded is 9, and hence you have a surplus or excess supply of 10, 11, 2 units, right? But what happens next? The markets automatically eliminates this surplus. And how does it eliminate it? Obviously, market realizes that the market price is too high. The market prices need to be lowered, and there would be a downward pressure or downward force on prices. The prices would adjust downward on its own, and the firms would start reducing the prices. And as they start reducing the prices, gradually, what happens is that quantity supplied starts to contract because of the law of supply, which says that when the price goes down, the quantity supplied goes down as well. Because of lower profit incentive, firms produce less. While the price goes down, the quantity demanded goes up because the product gets cheaper, so consumers buy more. The law of demand, good and sweet. And as a result, what we observe is that as the price goes down, the quantity supplied decreases from 11 all the way to 10, while quantity demanded increases all the way from 9 to 10, and hence your sweet equilibrium is restored back. The markets fully adjust back to equilibrium. So excess supply would occur when quantity supplied exceeds quantity demanded, and simply the price is just too high at $11, and the markets are inefficient. They are in a disequilibrium state. There's an imbalance between demand and supply. Supply is more than demand, and the price is too high, and firms are producing more than what they should, and consumers are buying. Firms are producing more than they should, means that from the perspective of the equilibrium, that firms are producing more while consumers are buying less and goods remain unsold. So firms will reduce prices obviously because they need to clear their stock. They would have stock of goods piled up, so prices would fall and markets would move back to equilibrium, restoring equilibrium in the market or restoring efficiency. Right, guys, so that's all that we need to know. I want you to read this on your own, pretty easy. And now we have basically, in this video we covered what market equilibrium is, we discuss what equilibrium is, we discuss what disequilibrium is, we discussed two cases of disequilibrium, shortage and surplus, and frankly there are two only. We also discussed relevant diagrams, and we also discussed that if there's a disequilibrium in the market, how markets would move back to equilibrium from a disequilibrium because of the role of prices. Right, prices play a role and they adjust the markets back to equilibrium on their own. Okay guys, so I'll see you all now in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you all. Until then, take care.